everybody, welcome back to the Inner Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Enoch Fossum, a marriage and family therapist intern who's specializing in addiction. And this is the show where we talk about things honestly, and the things that most people don't want to hear, right? Especially when it comes to pornography. Today, we're diving into something big, something I see quite frequently in the therapy room, which is the hidden cost of pornography on relationships, even when nobody knows. If you're listening today, odds are it's because you're struggling privately or your partner is struggling, right? Or you're trying to rebuild trust after years of secrecy. And this episode's going to be for you. If you're not married, I still think you can, or in a relationship even, I still think you can find a lot of value from this episode. So this episode's for really all of you. So I'm not here to shame you in any of this, but I'm here to be honest. Because porn doesn't just affect the person using it, it actually rewires the relationship quietly, slowly, one tiny little choice at a time. So today, I'm going to walk you through a couple of things. I'm going to walk you through how porn subtly changes emotional connection, why secrecy creates more damage than porn itself, how intimacy gets redefined without anyone explicitly deciding it, what partners experience but don't talk about, and how couples can actually start healing and start the change. So let's jump in. So first part, it doesn't matter if no one knows. Okay, except that actually does, which I'm sure you know. But subconsciously, we generally think that, hey, if no one knows, then I'm good. What's the problem here, right? So let me start with the blunt truth. Porn is going to impact your relationship even if no one ever finds out, okay? Let's say your partner never finds out, ever. It's still going to affect your relationship, most likely in a negative way. People come into my office saying things like, my partner doesn't know, so we're good. Or, I'm keeping it private to protect them, right? Because it's something I want to do, but my spouse may not like it. Or, it's just my personal habit, it's separate from my relationship. But here's what I see clinically and repeatedly. People don't realize how much porn quietly picks their relationships apart from the inside. It's like termites. I mean, you don't hear anything, right? You don't see anything. But one day, some cracks and under pressure, and you're like, wait, what? When did this foundation get so weak, right? What happened with that? And usually, this decline started way earlier than the actual confession of watching pornography. As we've talked about in previous episodes, it starts up here. It starts in the mind, in the micro moments, in the silent trade-offs you make without knowing you actually made them. Now, nobody wakes up and thinks, oh yeah, like I'm going to disconnect from my partner today. That's my goal. I hope she likes it. That's not what's happening, but that is what happens. So let me explain why. Porn use, especially habitual use, creates a kind of micro disengagement in relationships. It's not super obvious at first, but it shows up in these tiny little behavioral shifts. So for example, you stop reaching for your partner as much. You stop flirting. You stop expressing affection. You become more internally focused. You guard your phone a little tighter. It gives you anxiety when your spouse says, "Can I look at your phone?" You're a little hesitant, if not super hesitant, and say no. You initiate sex less or in a way that feels different. You become more impatient. You become less emotionally available. You become more easily frustrated or withdrawn. Now, I want to make it super clear. If you're listening to this and your spouse or someone you know struggles with porn, or let's say you don't even know, okay? I don't want you to take all these points and say, oh, you're becoming easily frustrated lately. I think you struggle with porn. You know, don't put this blanket statement over people who struggle with these things. That's not going to be helpful at all, okay? Or if there's someone you know, like a colleague or a friend who struggles with these, and you're like, classic. That's a porn user right there. It's possible, but it's not your place to say, to diagnose these guys, saying that, oh man, you don't want to assume, okay, if you don't know, so be careful with those. But if you do struggle with porn, then odds are you've seen some of these things actually affect your life. And none of those actually scream like, porn problem, right? but it's all super connected. So porn is like we've talked about, a super quick dopamine hit with zero vulnerability required. Just open up your phone, boom. And relationships are slow, emotional, and require effort, believe it or not. And that's hard. That's hard, man, to be able to put effort into a relationship, because most of the time, especially nowadays, right, we don't want to put in a ton of effort into things. We want things now, not even just porn. We want everything instantly. Amazon, 1-day delivery. If we have to wait 3 days, I'm going to pay extra for shipping. Stuff like that. So over time, your nervous system is going to quietly start preferring this fast lane of things. So anything that takes longer is going to be a pain. Porn doesn't just steal your sexual energy, it steals your relational presence. Not just in intimate relationships. It steals your relational presence with almost everybody that you engage with. You can be physically home, but emotionally gone. Still married, less invested. Still talking, but not connecting. Still having sex, but not really there. And a lot of the times, partners often feel this before the user does. They can't always name it, but they can sense that something might be off here. We're wired for connections, for connection as human beings. And we can feel disconnection before we actually understand it. Isn't that interesting? Now, here's something that most people never think about. Porn quietly becomes the third partner in the relationship. Not because you invited it, right, most of the time. Not because you meant for it, but because repetition rewires desire. And this is where things get especially tricky. Nobody sits down and says, hey babe, let's renegotiate our intimacy so that pornography becomes part of this emotional cycle. We need to invite this guy in here. Right? Gronk. But the renegotiation happens anyway. Intimacy turns into a triangle. You, your partner, and this porn script. Even if the porn script never sees the light of day. Here's the clinical pattern I see. First, porn creates this detached arousal template, right? A reference point for sexual energy that isn't tied to emotional closeness. And 2, the relationship begins to orbit around the absence of vulnerability, not requiring vulnerability. 3, sex becomes more about performance and less about connection, because that's all pornography is a performance. And no, you art gurus, it's not art either. 4, partners begin to sense that they're no longer the emotional center of sexual desire. And 5, people start feeling unwanted without knowing why. Because here's the thing, porn changes what counts as connection, and it does so without asking permission. The relationship becomes the side dish to the main course that happens privately on a screen. That shift in and of itself is invisible, but it's powerful. Now let's talk about the partner for a moment, because their experience often gets overlooked, right? We tend to just think about the addict, not the partner or the betrayed. And you might think your partner has no idea. But here's the thing, man. Partners often are going to feel the effects before they ever discover the actual behavior. They know something's off, especially if you've been with them for a long time. They tend to describe things like, I feel he's here, but not here. I feel like I'm competing with something I can't see. I feel like I've become irrelevant. Something feels off, but I can't tell what it is. I feel rejected, but I can't explain it. There's a gap between us, and it's always there. Now remember, if this is something that you do feel, this does not automatically mean that your spouse is struggling with pornography addiction. Sometimes even things just like general stress can cause things like this. So be slow to assume. Okay, if not, don't assume at all. But these are things to actually look at and to be able to start a conversation around. Because partners pick up on emotional shifts the same way you can feel someone looking at you from across the room. You just do. Like there's something off there. We're wired for attunement. And porn itself is going to be disrupting that attunement. So one partner is going to sense distance, so they try harder. But the user interprets this as pressure. They pursue more, and the user withdraws more. And the cycle just goes. The classic pursue-withdraw relationship. And then when the truth finally comes out, whether through admission or a discovery, the partner often says, oh, man, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was. Let me be super clear. The secrecy is more corrosive to the relationship than the porn itself. Not because hiding is immoral, but because secrecy changes the structure of the overall relationship, right? Odds are your partner can handle the idea that you have been struggling with pornography, but they cannot handle this idea of you lying over and over and over again. If they can't trust you, that's a bigger deal than you having a porn problem. A relationship thrives on things like openness, emotional presence, transparency, and a shared reality. And secrecy is going to create things that are complete opposite of that. Things like emotional distance, compartmentalization, mental withdrawal, and two competing realities. And here's the part people don't realize is that secrecy forces you to bond more with the behavior than with your actual partner. Every secret creates an emotional obligation. The more you hide, the more alone you become. And the more alone you become, the more you turn to that habit. And the more you turn to that habit, the more you hide. There's the classic cycle. Now, of course, this isn't because you're bad. This isn't because because you don't love your partner. But because secrecy is a relationship in itself, a heavy one, that's where the problems can be. You carry the burden. You protect the secret. You make decisions around it. You lie not just to your partner, but to yourself. And internally, you know there's a gap between who you're trying to be and what you're actually doing. And that gap is going to grow into shame, and the shame grows into disconnection, and disconnection kills intimacy. Now let's talk about the user side for a moment. People often say, I don't want porn more than my partner, or it's not like I'm choosing porn over them. It's not really affecting me. But the nervous system doesn't care what you believe, right? We've talked about that. Your brain doesn't care if it's a screen or if it's a real person. And generally it doesn't know the difference. It's going to respond to what you repeat. So repeated porn use shapes arousal patterns, expectations, novelty thresholds, patience for organic intimacy, emotional tolerance, and reward systems. And here's the truth that people don't really want to admit. But porn is easier than intimacy. It's predictable, it's fast, it never rejects you, it doesn't require any effort, it doesn't require emotional presence, it doesn't require repair conversations, it doesn't require vulnerability. So guess what the brain's going to learn? Okay, this is the easier path for sexual gratification. Why would I go through this path that requires all of these things like time, connection, vulnerability, when I can just go watch porn to get this same hit? This isn't because you're broken. You're not broken. This isn't because you're weak. This is just because the brain has adapted to convenience. That's all it is. Your brain is just trying to make your life easier. And that adaptation shows up in your relationship even if no one knows. So here's what couples can get confused on, is they think the problem is stress, or they're growing apart, or parenting, busyness, or losing the spark. But, clinically, I see these things tied to porn use all the time. Things like avoiding deep conversations, less eye contact, disinterest in emotional intimacy, shorter patience, more irritability, less desire to solve conflict, feeling numb toward the relationship, decreased sexual confidence, feeling overwhelmed by emotional closeness. These can look like just regular relationship issues, and they can be. They're also connected to pornography in a way, obviously, if you are struggling with pornography. So if those are some of the things that you do struggle with in your relationship as the person struggling, then it may not be because you just don't know how to talk to people. It could be because of the pornography, dude. And a lot of the times, especially when you say, I don't know what the problem is, or I don't know why I'm like this, it's most likely the pornography, dude. That's probably causing you to act a certain way and be a certain way. It's going to change the way you show up in your relationship. And so when the partner eventually finds out they're not just reacting to the porn itself, they're reacting to things like the secrecy, the months or years of emotional distance, the confusing mixed signals, the loss of shared reality, the grief of realizing they weren't actually imagining the disconnection. It's not just betrayal or disorientation. It's the moment they realize this relationship that I thought I was in wasn't the relationship you were living. And that's a deep shock to the system. That's a deep shock. So what now, right at this point? Like, how do couples heal? So here's the good news, and it is good news. Couples can heal from this fully and stronger than before, but only if both people understand what needs to be repaired. Healing's not just about stopping porn. It's not just about sobriety. It's about things like rebuilding trust, presence, transparency, emotional safety, a shared reality, and intimacy that isn't distorted by all this secrecy. Let me lay out a little roadmap for you. Step 1, things like radical ownership. This is blunt, but it's true. Healing begins when the user stops minimizing. So no more of this, it wasn't that bad, or it didn't really affect you, or stop, you're overreacting, or it didn't mean anything. Partners need acknowledgement, not justification. So stop trying to justify it, dude. Own up to it. The user, in essence, needs to say something like, yes, this impacted us. I see it. I own it. And I'm committed to repairing the effect it had on our connection. That sentence is worth more than 100 promises to do better, or I'll be sober now. Step 2 is rebuilding transparency. Transparency is not surveillance. It's mutual clarity about what's actually real. This includes things like sharing triggers, sharing struggles, sharing progress, tracking behavior honestly, and creating predictable openness. Now, if you are the betrayed or your partner is the one watching pornography, it is not your job for them to always report to you daily and you be their therapist, okay, or you be their sponsor. You don't want that mantle, and it's not your job to do that. But it is your job to be there as a support. And so if it's helpful for them to check in with you every day, to check things like triggers, if they manage, things like that, then let's get on that. Let's do it. Healing is going to happen in the light, not in the dark. So the more transparent we are, the better. Step 3 is restoring emotional presence. Intimacy begins way before the bedroom. It's not just about sex. The user has to learn how to be present, how to listen fully, how to show emotion, how to stay open instead of shutting down, and make their partner feel chosen. This is the part that couples underestimate, but clinically it's the most important. Step 4, rebuilding sexual intimacy is slow. You can't immediately return to normal. You have to build a new intimacy, a new kind of intimacy, one that's rooted in things like connection, eye contact, emotional engagement, shared vulnerability, and mutual desire. It's not about performance, not pressure, and not porn scripts, heaven forbid. I often tell couples that you're not trying to get back what you had. You're trying to rebuild something new. Step 5, forgiveness. But none of that cheap crap, not the cheap kind. Forgiveness isn't something like moving on quickly or pretending it didn't matter, ignoring your feelings or burying resentment. Forgiveness in and of itself is a process, one where the partner feels safe again, one where the user demonstrates change over time, and one where connection is built at a deep level. Forgiveness is earned, not demanded. So let me wrap up with 2 messages, one to the user, one to the partner. To the user, now listen carefully. You're not a monster. You're not broken. You're not this guy or gal beyond repair. But you have to tell the truth, first to yourself, then to your partner. You can do things like rebuild intimacy. You can reconnect. You can rewire your mind. You can heal this relationship. But it starts with honesty and presence. Remember, your worth as a person, as a human being, is 100%. Nothing is going to change that. Nothing can change that. That doesn't mean that there is work that you need to do to create the relationship and the life that you want. Now, my message to the partner or the betrayed: you're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're not overreacting. Your nervous system felt the disconnection long before your actual mind understood it. And you're not alone. You're not unlovable. Healing is possible. Not because you should tolerate hurt, but because people can truly change when they're willing, honest, and accountable. Porn creates these hidden fractures in a relationship long before anyone realizes what's actually happening, right? Like the termites. But fractures are not the same as destruction. Fractures can be repaired, foundations can be rebuilt, intimacy can be restored. The key is refusing to stay in the silence, refusing to pretend everything's fine, refusing to let secrecy be this third partner, and choosing honesty, connection, and healing instead. All right, there you have it. Thanks for joining me today on the Inner Revolution podcast. If this episode hit home for you, if you're navigating this in your own relationship, I want you to know, again, you're not alone, and healing is possible. It starts with conversations like this one, right? And if you found this episode helpful, share it with someone who needs it, who could benefit from it, who needs it. Leave a review and come back next week as we continue diving into the real work of becoming who you are meant to be from the inside out.